Today, we're looking at the good Dr. Facilier. Facilier really leans into his role as a Voodoo Doctor with all of his status effects. He doesn't have many ways to do big direct damage, but instead is built to harm his rivals in subtle ways that are hard to stop. In order to properly discuss Dr. Facilier, I need to go over his status effects and what they do since they are his specialty. When your character is flustered, that summoner has to banish a card at random from their hand at the start of their turn. Shrunken characters have their attack reduced to 1 and cannot use cards with attack symbols. They can still discard that card to do an additional damage to their standard attack. When a character is stealthy, the opponent must banish a card to attack that character. A cursed character loses 1 HP at the beginning phase of their turn. As we go on, we'll talk more about the impact of each of these effects. But now that we're familiar with all the ways that the Doctor can trick you, let's take a look at his character card. Like most characters, Facilier can move 2 spaces. However, that's where the similarities stop. He can only hit for 1 damage, but in exchange, he provides a hand size of 3. He's tied for both the lowest health points and victory points, with 7 and 4 respectively. As a result, he isn't a big target for most teams. Status effects remain even when he's KO'd, so the benefit of going after him is reduced. Tarot reading is his skill. You reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a magic card, then Facilier gets 2 action phases instead of 1. If it's not a magic card, then you have to reveal one of your cards at random. The cost of possibly revealing a card usually isn't that bad, but because of this skill, you should be intentional with how you build your team around him. The benefit that comes from having 2 action phases shouldn't be underestimated. This encourages you to have at least 1 other magic user to maximize your action phases. However, if you can consistently get this to work, it allows Facilier a lot of flexibility to either deal damage or status effects throughout the field. The Doctor's upgrade is Mysterious Voodoo. On his ending phase, damage each rival with a status effect on them. If this KOs your opponent, you gain another VP. This is situational but useful. Gaining VP is rare, and this allows you to pick up a few if you can work the situation to your advantage. It also compensates you for losing all of those status effects when you KO your rival. In my opinion, it's not the easiest to use, but you can sneak in a victory by piling up the damage where they least expect it. So, let's go through Facilier's cards and break it down a little further. I'll be going from most common to least common as some cards appear in the deck multiple times. One thing to keep in mind with the Doctor's cards is that each of these action phases will seem slightly weaker damage-wise to compensate for his status effects and potentially having 2 phases. Parlor Tricks gives an adjacent rival 1 flustered. Then it damages each rival that is adjacent to that target. This does fair damage if your opponent is grouped together, but the real benefit is from being able to force your rival to banish a card from their hand each of their turns. Next is Slimy Little Frog. It has a range of 2 and allows you to give a rival 1 shrunken. Afterwards, you can add 1 status counter to any amount of status effects on that rival. Effectively, you can put 2 shrunken on, and then make other status effects worse. If your opponent doesn't have something to eliminate status effects, shrunken can completely shut down their offense, since it prevents several cards from being used. Fortunately, the card is worded in a way that you only increase the status effects that help you. No need to add a turn of Taunt to Sully or Stealthy to Aladdin. Seal the Deal may be Facilier's best attacking move. It allows you to do 2 damage to an adjacent rival. However, if this attack KOs your rival, you gain an additional VP, and they must banish a card from their hand. This card is slightly situational, but if you're looking for a way to turn things around in an unexpected fashion, this is a good way to gain momentum. 2 damage doesn't sound like much, but remember it's more than his typical offense, and you still may get 2 action phases. His last 4 cards only have 1 copy each. Dr. Facilier is such a smooth talker that this card has no range. You simply add up to 1 counter for each status effect on each character that already has an effect. Then, if 3 characters have status effects, you get to draw 2 cards. This doesn't do much by itself, but if you've already been making use of status effects, it makes things go better for at least 1 more round. It's also a good way to catch your opponent off guard. Has Sully immobilized himself by traveling through the door? Give him some time to sit in timeout and think about what he's done. Friends on the other side. Where was I? Oh yeah. So, this card has potentially the highest damage output of any of his cards. Each adjacent rival gains 2 curse, then takes 1 damage for each type of status effect on that character. This is indirect damage, so it bypasses stealthy and taunt, but then uses those status effects to further hurt your rival. It's possible to do 4 or more damage to a character with this card if played right, and that's before dealing with the damage from being cursed. Bamboozled flusters 1 rival within range 2, but then gives you an additional action phase. Depending on how your tarot reading goes, you could get 3 action phases. I think Demona is the only other character who could potentially have 3 action phases. Also, making your opponent banish a card is great since it messes with their hand alongside their potential to upgrade. Stack up those statuses. The Shadow Man is your only movement card. It allows you to move the Doctor 2 spaces and gain 2 stealthy. If you couldn't tell by this point, Dr. Facilier really wants to make sure the opponent doesn't have a lot of cards in hand. I really suggest that you use this as designed and don't discard it to gain another movement for someone else, unless you really need that benefit. Stealthy is an underrated status effect that makes people think twice before attacking you. So, what's the diagnosis for this Voodoo Doctor? I think it's really easy to underestimate him, because he doesn't simply smash everything in front of him as if he's Gaston. He may not have a lot of offense, but he can utterly shut down your opponent, leaving them shrunken and without a hand. Cursed is great for whittling away at your opponent's health. Shrunken ensures that one offensive character can't beat you by themselves. Stealthy and Flustered work together to ensure your opponent's hand size is small. On top of all that, having multiple action phases allows you to impact additional rivals. If you have children that are having difficulty using his abilities, you may need to help them understand his strengths and weaknesses. This is a good opportunity to teach them that there is more than one way to win. Dr. Facilier's strengths lie in completely destroying your opponent's plans. Whether it's slowing down their ability to upgrade, keeping their hand size small, or putting a damaging character on the sidelines, your opponent will be consistently reacting to this Voodoo Doctor. It's hard to counter status effects. While there are a few cards that can remove said status effects, a lot of the time, you're stuck with them until you're KO'd. Multiple actions in one turn. Now, this one's a little dependent on how many magic cards you have and how your draw works out, but multiple phases can lead to devastating results. His weaknesses, however, are the fact that he has low offensive capabilities. Even though this isn't his function, having 1 damage standard attack can make things difficult offensively. He has limited team building potential. Not everyone meshes well with the Doctor. You need the right team to assemble to get the most out of him. He's unorthodox. He plays a bit differently from the rest of the cast. It can take getting used to him to find the sweet spot. I consider Maleficent and Dr. Facilier to be the hardest to master of the 8 characters. If you're not intentional about how you use him, you can feel like you're wasting turns because everything seems too scattered. Fortunately, even if things aren't going well, the Doctor isn't worth that many VP, so you have some room for error. It's not that he's overly complicated, it's just that direct damage isn't where he shines. There is a significant difference between how Dr. Facilier performs on teams designed around him versus ones that don't. He wants to have magic cards to support his skill and having multiple action phases. He also wants to use his status effects to open the door for his teammates to go wild. He can fit with multiple people, but you need to have a plan because he plays different from the others. There are a few teams that you can go with, but here's some examples. Maleficent, Dr. Facilier, and Mickey. This team is the magic team, and they support each other pretty well. Maleficent's upgrade and Facilier's skill, as well as Mickey's skill, call for magic cards to populate the deck. This will ensure that Facilier gets a lot of magic cards and action phases. What it lacks in defense, it makes up for in constant offensive status effects. They're also worth very low VP, so it's hard for other teams to trade hits. This is one of the most dominant teams that I'm aware of. But one of the flaws in this team is that Mickey and Maleficent share an upgrade path, so you'll likely have to pick only one of them to be upgraded. Dr. Facilier, Aladdin, and Gaston. I know this doesn't have much in the way of magic, but every single person on this team has tools to banish cards from the opponent. This isn't the strongest synergy yet, but there is value in keeping your opponent low on cards. If they're too aggressive with their hand, then you can demolish their options. Facilier and Gaston do have the same upgrade path as well, so you need to figure out whichever one is best to upgrade based on whether Gaston's offense or the status effects are more effective at this point. So, that is our breakdown of Dr. Facilier. Thank you for joining us. Make sure to stick around for our next breakdown. But until then, remember, you're in my world now, not yours, and I got friends on the other side. See you next time.